the headlines, officials taking proactive action to deal with those responsible for the building collapse. But what has been going on in terms of the search and rescue mission, or recovery, should I say?
Well, Tepe, so it's been a daunting couple of days. Just with the rescue teams today, the bodies of plus minus 8 victims of this devastating earthquake were recovered from the collapsed buildings. And this is just at the areas where we were with the rescue team, and devastated families that we have come across struggling to come to terms with what has taken place. I think at this particular point, in speaking to rescue teams, they have indicated that as the clock ticks, as the time goes by, this will certainly change from a rescue mission to a more of a recovery mission, in that as the hours go by, the chances of finding anyone alive certainly are dwindling. But for these families that have been camping for days outside these buildings that collapsed last week Sunday, they just want the bodies of their loved ones brought to the surface to give them a dignified burial. We've been watching them throughout the day into the evening. They've brought their cars in, Tepiso. They would light bonfires outside throughout the night as rescue workers scramble through the debris trying to find their loved ones. Some of them carrying pictures, Tepiso, begging these rescue workers to have a look at the pictures and see if they've not been able to identify any of their loved ones from the bodies that have been brought to the surface. However, there have been pockets of relief in some of these instances where, at one of the buildings where we were over the past 24 hours, 12 people were brought up from the surface alive, and you can only but imagine what it is that they have gone through, spending hundreds and hundreds of hours underground, hoping that someone was going to come and rescue them. Heavy machinery has been brought in from all around the world. When we arrived here, we had already picked up that there had been several hundred rescue teams that have been brought into this country, sent to different provinces to assist with the rescue and recovery process. There's much more now. At this particular vantage point where we are at the Hatay Stadium, and this is somewhat an area where most of the rescue teams are setting up and deploying from here to areas that are in need. And I can certainly tell you, this entire stadium now is packed to capacity. We've set up tents outside. We've been sleeping outside in the bitter cold conditions. But I think, that's neither here or there in comparison to the pain and grief that thousands of people are going through at this stage. And just listening to your intro, Tepi, so absolutely, the structural integrity of some of the buildings has been called into question. We've been speaking to a number of locals where they've indicated that, some of the structures that have been put up, yes, some of them may be old, but the structural integrity of some of these buildings should be questioned, and that the authorities in this country should take harsh action. We've also seen several reports in which, the authorities here have indicated they're going to take some action as a result of some indicating that the number of people who have died is as a result of the poor construction of some of these buildings. And I guess it begs to ask the question, why do the authorities then wait for a moment such as this, where we're sitting at a death toll now? A little bit earlier on this afternoon, it was at about 28,000. I'm sure between then and now, it certainly has moved and is heading towards the 30,000 mark. But Tepisa, I must tell you, there have been calls for action to be taken, because there's a strong belief from many individuals, the residents, and of course some of the authorities, that not so many people would have died had some of these construction been built in the correct way. I guess that may be a conversation for another day, but currently the anguish, the devastation, the emotion is exactly what we're seeing on the ground. At the last stop that we made this afternoon at one of the destruction sites, or one of the sites that has been severely compromised or has actually collapsed, you know, the families there are just it's too difficult for them to say anything. It's too difficult for them to speak to anyone. You know, sometimes I even feel like our presence as the media, while we need to cover the story and tell the story of the anguish of these people and the devastation that they have gone through, it somewhat looks a little bit intrusive when we have our cameras in their faces trying to tell the story, yet they are in so much pain. And, I think that is certainly something that is going to go on for a very long time. Don't forget that the world is watching now. The world is reporting, Tshepiso, on this destruction, devastation, catastrophe that has taken place. But at some point, we're all going to pull out. The media will pull out. There won't be as many aid organizations here. People will go home, but these people will be left with the anguish and having to rebuild their lives. I tell you, Tshepiso, in some of the areas that we visited, Hatay City, for example, where we are, it is absolutely razed to the ground. Every street that you go into is strewn just with debris everywhere, and people sitting outside. There's also been, some residents or some of the community that feels that a lot more could have been done by the government here in order to make sure that there was a sufficient provision that was made for them as they're taken from these homes that have completely collapsed and taken to places where they would be able to get some shelter. We visited one area today where in fact, two bodies were recovered. Just on the sidelines of that, as rescue workers were digging, with heavy machinery, just a stone's throw away from there, you can see what I would refer to as tent cities that have been erected now by these residents themselves, because there hasn't been sufficient intervention made in terms of where they're going to be accommodated. That has been a major criticism of what has taken place here. We've not had much in terms of a conversation with the government here. They're stationed elsewhere, so what the best we can do at this stage is tell the story of the people, speak to rescue workers, move with the rescue dog. They are trying to check if there are any signs of life. That is as far as we can get at this particular stage. But I can certainly tell you, Tshepiso, looking on the faces of these people that we encounter every single day, it's going to take a very long time for them to recover. Where they're going to go, I don't even think they know. And certainly the damage itself, if you look at the infrastructure that we've been beaming on our television screens, which has totally collapsed, it's going to perhaps run into billions to try and bring up these structures once again. Those that have not totally collapsed at Tshepiso, you can see there is a move or a decision at this particular stage to totally collapse them, because there is also a fear that some residents who have lost everything would want to go back into these structures, which are incredibly unsafe, and want to salvage what they can because they have absolutely nothing. The scary part about all this is that there have been moments where, while these communities are still reeling from what had taken place, there have been quite a number of tremors already. Just today, at one of the sites where we were, where the recovery had taken place of two bodies of the victims of this earthquake, there had already been two tremors there. As we were standing broadcasting, the ground started shaking, and everyone, including the rescue workers, had sort of ran towards my direction. And we were very concerned about the fact that with the tremors that are currently taking place, you might have these buildings that have pancaked that might even now collapse once again. Last night, when my colleagues and I and the media team and rescue workers are camped out inside these tents that you can see behind me, while we were asleep, the ground had been shaking. The tremors are continuing. So there's a great fear at this particular stage that if these tremors continue, you might have a further collapse of buildings that are still somewhat slanted towards the left or towards the right, or have pancaked or have not really fallen completely to the ground. And the risk with that is that you still have hundreds of people that are still in these communities. Some of them today, civilians that have come as far as Istanbul, who have come to bring whatever machinery that they have to assist these rescue workers, because while you may have scores of rescue workers from around the world who have been deployed to several areas, they certainly can't go to every single place. They also have to choose where to go. They've been called by everyone, being told.
All right, Chriselda, let's leave it there. Thank you very much, and hoping that you do indeed stay safe with the colleagues that you're with there. Rescue workers from Gift of the Givers. That's whom my colleague Chriselda Lewis has gone to Hatay City in Turkey for that rescue and recovery mission. As she says, hopes fast dwindling of finding survivors. Death toll being put at 29,000 for Turkey at the moment. Syria, 3,600 people, and we're told that it's also seeing a flurry of high-profile individuals. Turkey, that is, the Qatari Emir, we believe, is headed there. The Greek finance minister has already made a visit there as well. So we'll keep you up to speed as and when these details come in.